Welcome back to Hidden Secrets. Another story, another mystery. Let's begin. My neighbor thought he was a genius for stealing my high-speed Wi-Fi every single night. He mocked me for being too tech-illiterate to set a password, but he didn't realize that an open network is a two-way mirror. While he was stealing my data, I was harvesting his darkest secrets. By the time he realizes the trap, his entire life will be deleted. The neighborhood of Oak Ridge was the kind of place where people took pride in their manicured lawns and silent rivalries. I had just moved into a modest bungalow, hoping for some peace to run my cybersecurity consultancy. But peace was the last thing my neighbor, Bradley Thorne, wanted to give me. Bradley was a 40-year-old crypto bro who drove a loud, obnoxious sports car and treated everyone like they were NPCs in his personal video game. From day one, he made it clear he thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He'd stand on his porch, smirking as I carried my server equipment into my house. "Hey, new guy," he'd yell. "Hope you got good internet. This area is a dead zone unless you pay for the premium fiber." I just nodded and smiled. I didn't tell him I had installed a dual-band, enterprise-grade fiber line with a custom-built router. And I definitely didn't tell him why I left the network named NETGAR-free, completely unprotected. Within 48 hours, Bradley was hooked. I watched the traffic logs on my monitor. A device named Brad IPHONE 15 Pro and WiFi Revenge connected almost instantly. He probably thought I was an idiot, the new neighbor who didn't even know how to set a WPA2 key. But here's the thing about open Wi-Fi. When you connect to my network, you aren't just taking my data. You're inviting me into yours. I set up a man-in-the-middle MITM proxy. Every packet Bradley sent, every website he visited, and every unencrypted password he typed flowed through my server before it reached the internet. I wasn't just watching his Netflix habits, I was seeing his soul. And it was ugly. At first, it was just petty stuff. He was bragging on Discord about how he was leeching off the dumb nerd next door. He was looking at expensive watches he couldn't afford. But then, about a week in, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Bradley wasn't just a loudmouth neighbor. He was running a sophisticated phishing scheme targeting elderly people in the tri-state area. He'd send out fake, urgent IRS emails, tricking seniors into giving up their social security numbers, which he then sold on the dark web for Bitcoin. I sat in my darkened office, the glow of 3 monitors reflecting off my glasses. I watched as he chatted with a buyer known as Shadow Broker. "Got a fresh batch of 50 identities. 0.5 BTC and they're yours," Bradley typed. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just about a stolen Wi-Fi signal anymore. This was a predator living 20 feet away from me. I could have called the police right then, but I knew how these guys worked. If he got a whiff of a raid, he'd wipe his drives and throw his phone in a lake. To truly stop him, I needed to lead him into a digital cage he couldn't escape. I started injecting ghost files into his downloads. Every time he downloaded a spreadsheet of his victims, I attached a hidden tracker that mapped his local file structure. I was building a complete digital twin of his hard drive. A few days later, Bradley knocked on my door. He was holding a beer and had that same arrogant smirk. "Hey man, I noticed your grass is getting a little long," he said, leaning against my doorframe. "You spend too much time on those computers. You should get out more. By the way, thanks for the free air. My router is acting up, so I've been using yours. You really should set a password, you know? Anyone could be watching." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I feigned a confused look. "Oh, really? I thought the guy who set it up did that. Is it dangerous?" Bradley laughed, a loud, condescending sound. "Nah, don't worry about it. I'm a tech expert. I'll keep an eye on it for you. Just consider me your digital security guard." "Thanks, Bradley," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I feel much safer knowing you're watching over me." As soon as he left, I went back to my desk. I saw he had just logged into his primary bank account. Because he was on my network, I had already captured his session tokens. I didn't want his money, I wanted his leverage. I noticed he had a hidden folder titled Collections. Inside were scans of his own fraudulent documents, fake IDs he used for his scams, and a ledger of every cent he had stolen. He was arrogant enough to keep his trophies on a laptop connected to a stranger's Wi-Fi. But Bradley had one more secret, a secret that didn't involve money. It was a secret that involved the local police chief's daughter. I saw an encrypted chat folder pop up on my screen. My heart hammered against my ribs as I began the decryption process. The twist was coming. Bradley thought he was the hunter, but he was currently walking into a slaughterhouse of his own making. I wasn't just going to report him. I was going to make sure he lost everything: his car, his house, and his freedom, all while he was still using my free Wi-Fi. By the second week, Bradley's digital life was laid bare on my screens like an anatomy chart. He had become comfortable, too comfortable. He wasn't just using my Wi-Fi for his business anymore, he was using it for everything. He streamed his movies, synced his personal photos, and even managed his smart home devices through my NETGAR-free gateway. Every night, I sat in the blue glow of my monitors, watching the data packets dance. It was like living in his head. I knew Bradley's favorite food, Thai, extra spicy, ordered via an unencrypted app. I knew his credit score, abysmal, which explained the scams, and I knew his schedule. But then, the data started to shift. Bradley began accessing a hidden partition on a cloud server I hadn't seen before. It was protected by a layer of encryption that was much tougher than his usual sloppy work. This piqued my interest. A guy like Bradley doesn't use high-level encryption unless he's terrified. I decided it was time to push back, just a little. I didn't want to alert him, but I wanted to see how he handled a glitch. I initiated a script that slowed his connection down to dial-up speeds every time he tried to access that specific hidden partition. From my window, I watched his house. Few minutes later, the lights in his living room flickered on. I could see him through the curtains, pacing back and forth, holding his laptop and shaking it as if physical force would fix the bandwidth. He stepped out onto his porch, holding his phone up to the sky, looking for a better signal. "Damn piece of junk," he yelled into the night. He looked over at my darkened house, probably cursing the idiot neighbor whose free internet was finally failing him. The next morning, Bradley was at my door again. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He wasn't smirking as much today. "Hey man," he said, skipping the small talk. "Your internet been acting weird lately? I was trying to, do some stock trading last night and the connection kept dropping." I rubbed my eyes, pretending I had just woken up. "Oh, is it? I wouldn't know, Bradley. I mostly just use it for checking weather reports and watching cat videos. Maybe there's a limit on how much free data it can handle?" Bradley's jaw tightened. "Listen, I can fix it for you. I've got some high-end hardware. If you let me into your crawl space to check the wiring, I can boost the signal for both of us. It'll be a win-win." My internal alarm bells went from a hum to a roar. He didn't want to fix my internet. He wanted to install a physical tap or a hardware keylogger. He was getting suspicious, and he wanted to control the source. "I'd love to, Bradley, really," I said, leaning against the doorframe to block his view inside. "But I've got a professional crew coming in next week to upgrade the whole system to a secured private line. The landlord insists on it. You know how it is." Bradley's face went pale for a split second. A secured private line meant his free ride was ending. It meant he'd have to get his own internet, which would create a paper trail he desperately wanted to avoid. "Next week? Why so soon?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Safety first, right?" "Like you said, anyone could be watching," I replied with a friendly pat on his shoulder. He left without another word, but I saw the way he gripped his phone. He was panicked. As soon as his door slammed, I jumped back to my terminal. Bradley was back on the network, but he wasn't fishing anymore. He was frantic. He was moving files, big files. He was transferring gigabytes of data from his local drive to an offshore server in Moldova. My sniffer caught the destination IP. This was his exit strategy. He realized the walls were closing in, and he was preparing to wipe his local footprint and disappear. But I wasn't about to let him delete the evidence. I launched a authentication attack. Every few seconds, I kicked his devices off the Wi-Fi. It's the digital equivalent of someone tripping you every time you try to run. He would start to upload, get to 40%, and pop. The connection would die. I could hear him screaming through the walls of our houses. No, work, you piece of sh." While he was busy fighting the connection, I used the distraction to bypass that tough encryption on his hidden partition. It took me 3 hours of brute forcing, but I finally cracked it. I expected to find more stolen social security numbers or maybe some crypto keys. What I found was far worse. Bradley wasn't just a scammer. He was an extortionist. The folder was filled with surreptitiously recorded videos from a local high-end hotel. He had hacked their internal security cameras and was using the footage to blackmail local businessmen and politicians. And then, I saw the file that made the room feel like it had dropped 20 degrees. Chief Miller, Office Private. Chief Miller was the head of the Oak Ridge Police Department. The video showed the chief in a very compromising position, not a crime, but something that would absolutely destroy his career and his family in a conservative town like this. Bradley wasn't just stealing money, he was holding the entire town's leadership by the throat. This was why he was so arrogant. He felt untouchable because he had the blue shield in his pocket. If any cop tried to investigate his crypto scams, he'd just send a link to the chief. I sat back, my heart racing. I realized then that if I just went to the local police, the evidence would disappear before it even reached a desk. I couldn't trust the local system. I had to go higher. I looked at the clock. 3:00 a.m. I began a mirror script. This script didn't just record his data. It redirected every single thing he did to a secure server I had set up in a different state, one that was being monitored by a contact I had in the cyber crimes division of the FBI. I wanted Bradley to feel the pressure. I wanted him to think he was losing control of his tech, so he'd make a mistake. I sent a system message to his laptop screen disguised as a router notification. Critical security breach detected, unidentified user on network, initiating data log export to authorities. It was a total bluff, but to a paranoid criminal like Bradley, it was a death sentence. Through my window, I saw Bradley's house go dark. Then, 5 minutes later, his garage door opened. He threw a black duffel bag into the trunk of his car. He was making a run for it. He thought he could outrun the data. What he didn't know was that I had already used his own smart home app, which he accessed through my Wi-Fi to GPS tag his car. I didn't need to follow him. I just needed to watch him on my map. As his sports car roared down the street, I sat down at my keyboard and typed one last command. I didn't just shut off the Wi-Fi. I sent a kill command to his laptop's BIOS. The moment he tried to open that computer again, the motherboard would fry, and the hard drive would be encrypted with a key that even I didn't have. He was driving into the dark with a trunk full of evidence he couldn't delete and a GPS tracker he didn't know he had. "The hunt is on, Bradley," I whispered. "And you're the one wearing the bell." The climax was coming. The FBI was already moving into position at the state line, and Bradley was driving straight into their arms, still trying to connect his phone to any open Wi-Fi he could find along the highway. The roar of Bradley's engine faded into the distance, but on my screen, he was louder than ever. I watched the little blue dot on my monitor, his car's GPS, speeding toward the interstate. Bradley thought he was escaping, but in the world of cybersecurity, distance is an illusion. As long as his phone was searching for a signal, he was tethered to me. I picked up my burner phone and dialed a non-emergency number that bypassed the local Oak Ridge dispatch. I needed the feds, but I also needed to make sure Chief Miller's compromised department didn't get a heads up. "Agent Henderson," I said when the line picked up. "The package is in transit. He's heading north on I-5. He's got the collections folder with him. And Henderson, tell your team to be careful. He thinks he's got leverage on the local law. He might try something desperate." "Copy that," Henderson's raspy voice replied. "We've got a mobile intercept unit 20 miles ahead of his current pings. Keep that tracker live." I hung up and turned my attention back to Bradley's digital footprint. Even while driving 80 miles per hour, Bradley was panicking. My logs showed his phone frantically trying to connect to Xfinity, hotspots, and Starbucks guest networks along the highway. Every time his phone connected for a split second, I got a burst of data. He was trying to message Shadow Broker again. "I'm burned. The nerd next door was a plant. I'm moving the hardware to the secondary drop. Clear the logs on your end. Now." The Shadow Broker didn't reply. In the criminal world, once you're a liability, you're a ghost. Bradley was alone. I decided to play with his head one last time. Since I still had access to his phone's CarPlay, through the last sync on my network, I pushed a remote command. Suddenly, Bradley's car speakers, the ones he used to blast obnoxious music to annoy the neighborhood, began to play a looped recording of his own voice. It was the recording of him bragging about the phishing scams. "They're just old people, man. They don't even know what a mouse is. It's like taking candy from a baby." I could only imagine the look on his face, trapped in a speeding metal box, listening to his own crimes being broadcasted to him by a ghost. I saw his speed jump from 80 to 95. He was losing it. He was terrified. But then the blue dot stopped. He wasn't at a police checkpoint. He was at a rest stop near the county line. My heart hammered. Why did he stop? I accessed his phone's camera, a trick I'd set up during one of his many free app downloads. The screen was dark, but the audio was clear. I heard a car door slam, then the sound of heavy breathing. "Chief." "Yeah, it's me," Bradley's voice hissed over the phone. He was calling Chief Miller. "Listen to me very carefully. I'm at the mile 42 rest stop. There are people following me, probably feds. If I go down, that video of you and the senator's daughter goes live on every server I own. You need to get your boys down here and stop them. Tell them I'm an armed suspect. Tell them whatever you want, but don't let them take my laptop." My blood ran cold. Bradley was playing his get-out-of-jail-free card. He was trying to force a confrontation between the local police and the FBI to create enough chaos for him to slip away. I checked the local police scanners. Within minutes, I heard it. "All units, we have a 1032 at the mile 42 rest stop. Suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. Approach with extreme caution. Priority 1. Chief Miller was actually doing it. He was sending his officers into a potential shootout to protect his own reputation. I had to act fast. I couldn't stop the local cops, but I could take away Bradley's leverage. I focused all my processing power on the Chief Miller office private file. I didn't delete it. I did something much more, hidden secrets style. I initiated a broadcast script. If Bradley's phone detected a specific signal, the one the FBI used for jamming, the script would automatically upload the chief's video to the local newspaper's tip line and every board member in the city. I sent a text to Chief Miller's private number from an unknown ID. "The video is already on a timer, Chief. If Bradley Thorne is accidentally killed or if the feds are blocked, it goes public in 60 seconds. Stand down your men if you want to save your family." On the map, I saw the local police cruisers slowing down. They were 2 miles out from the rest stop. They stopped. The scanner went quiet, then, "Cancel that 1032. False alarm. Suspect is not at this location." Chief Miller had blinked. He chose his family over Bradley's protection. Bradley was now truly alone at that rest stop. I watched through the phone's camera as he looked at his screen, confused why the sirens hadn't arrived. He started typing a message to the chief, but his phone suddenly displayed a giant, red X. I had finally triggered the BIOS kill. His laptop, sitting in the passenger seat, began to hiss as the battery was forced into an overheat cycle, frying the motherboard. His phone turned into a brick in his hand. The digital lights were going out. Through the grainy, last-second feed of the camera before it died, I saw the headlights of 3 black SUVs pulling into the rest stop. No sirens. Just the silent, methodical movement of professionals. I saw Bradley drop the phone. I heard the faint sound of FBI, hands in the air. I leaned back in my chair, the silence of my own house suddenly feeling very heavy. The blue dot on my screen turned gray. Offline. The neighbor who thought he was a genius, the man who stole Wi-Fi and lives, was now just a man in handcuffs in the back of a van. But the hidden secret wasn't just about Bradley. There was one more twist waiting in the data, something Bradley himself hadn't realized he was carrying. Among the thousands of files I had mirrored, there was a small, encrypted log from Bradley's own router back at his house. It showed that Bradley wasn't the only one stealing Wi-Fi. Someone else had been inside his system, watching him, even before I moved in. Bradley Thorne wasn't the predator he thought he was. He was just a mid-level player in a much larger, much darker game. And the person who was watching Bradley, they were now watching me. I saw a single window pop up on my main monitor. It wasn't a script I had written. It was a simple text box. "Nice work, neighbor. You caught the small fish, but you should have kept the Wi-Fi open. We weren't finished with him." My breath hitched. I looked out my window at the empty house next door. The lights were off, but for the first time, I felt like someone was standing right behind me. The text box on my screen felt like a cold hand on my neck. We weren't finished with him. I stared at the empty house next door. Bradley was gone, hauled away by the FBI, but the digital ghost he had invited into his life was still here, and now it had found me. I realized that Bradley's sloppy security wasn't just his own fault. He had been compromised long ago. He was a mule for a much larger data theft ring, and I had just disrupted their primary node. Suddenly, my monitors began to flicker. The fans on my high-end servers ramped up to a deafening whine. Someone was initiating a brute force attack on my home network. I wasn't just the observer anymore, I was the target. I didn't panic. I was built for this. I cut the external fiber line, physically disconnecting my house from the world. The room went silent. The screens froze. "Okay," I whispered to the dark room. "You want to play? Let's play." I knew they couldn't reach me through the fiber anymore, but then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic clicking coming from my smart fridge in the kitchen. Then the smart thermostat. Then the light bulbs. They weren't coming through the internet. They were using a side channel attack through the local mesh network. Bradley's house was still full of smart devices, and they were acting as a bridge. I grabbed my laptop and ran to the basement. I had a dead man's switch hidden behind a false panel in the wall. If I flipped it, it would send a massive electromagnetic pulse, EMP, through my house's wiring, frying every piece of tech I owned, but it would also wipe the servers I had mirrored. But before I could reach the switch, my laptop, which was supposed to be offline, chimed. A video file began to play. It was a recording of me, sitting at my desk, taken only 10 minutes ago. The voice that came through the speakers was distorted, metallic. "You think you won because Bradley is in a cell. Bradley was a distraction. We let you catch him. We needed a clean break from the FBI's trail, and you provided it perfectly. But you have the master ledger now, and we can't let you keep it." I realized then what the hidden secret really was. Bradley's collections folder wasn't just blackmail on a police chief. Hidden inside the metadata was a list of every undercover agent currently embedded in the Moldovan cyber syndicate. Bradley didn't even know he had it. He was just the storage unit, and now I was the one holding the most dangerous document on the planet. "I don't have the ledger," I shouted at the empty room, my voice echoing. "The FBI has the physical drives?" "No," the voice replied. "They have the fried motherboard. The only clean copy of the master ledger is on the server you mirrored, the one sitting right behind you." I looked at my server rack. The blue lights were blinking in a pattern. It was a countdown. They weren't trying to steal the data, they were trying to trigger a thermal runaway. They were going to burn my house down with me inside it. I didn't have minutes, I had seconds. I didn't go for the EMP switch. Instead, I did the one thing they didn't expect. I reconnected the fiber line. "What are you doing?" the metallic voice hissed. "You're giving us the door?" "No," I said, my fingers flying across the keys. "I'm giving the FBI a live feed. Henderson is still on the line, you idiots. Every packet you're sending to burn my house is being traced back to your primary server in Chisinau." The clicking stopped. The lights stopped flickering. For a moment, there was total digital silence. I had bluffed. Henderson wasn't on the line. I had lost the connection when I cut the fiber. But the hackers didn't know that. In their world, the moment the Eye of Sauron, the FBI, looks at you, you vanish. I watched as the remote connections to my house dropped one by one. They were scrubbing their own trails, terrified that I had turned the hunter into the prey. The next morning, the neighborhood of Oak Ridge was quiet again. Bradley's car was gone. His house was taped off. I sat on my porch drinking a coffee that I had made with a manual French press. No smart devices, no Wi-Fi. A black sedan pulled up. Agent Henderson got out. He didn't look happy. "We got the drives, but they're toast," Henderson said, standing on my lawn. "And that master ledger you mentioned. We found no trace of it on the hardware we seized." I took a sip of my coffee. "That's a shame, Agent. Bradley must have been more careful than we thought." "You sure you don't have a copy?" Henderson asked, his eyes narrowing. "My system was compromised last night, Agent. I had to wipe everything. Total data loss," I said, looking him straight in the eye. Henderson stared at me for a long time. He knew I was lying. I knew he knew. But without the data, he had nothing. He tipped his hat and drove away. As his car disappeared, I went back inside. I walked to the kitchen and looked at my dumb toaster. I reached behind it and pulled out a single, tiny micro SD card. The hidden secret wasn't for the FBI, and it certainly wasn't for the syndicate. I walked to my mailbox and dropped a plain white envelope inside. It was addressed to an anonymous P.O. box in Langley, Virginia. Inside was the ledger and a small note. "From a neighbor who likes his privacy. Use this to bring them all down." I didn't want the money, I didn't want the fame, I just wanted my neighborhood back. As I walked back to my house, I saw a new family moving into the house on the other side. A young couple. They looked nice. The husband waved at me. "Hey," he called out. "Do you know if there's any good Wi-Fi around here? We haven't set ours up yet." I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Actually," I said, "I hear the guy who used to live next door has some free internet. But if I were you, I'd just buy a book. The signal around here is unpredictable." I went inside and locked my door. I didn't turn on the computer. I didn't check the logs. I just sat in the silence of a house that was finally, truly private. The digital world is a playground for predators, but sometimes the biggest predator is the one you never see coming. This story is a reminder that free is never actually free, and your privacy is the most valuable thing you own. If you enjoyed this high-tech game of cat and mouse and want to see more satisfying, pro-revenge stories where the underdog wins, please subscribe to Hidden Secrets. Your support allows us to keep digging into the shadows to bring you the truth. Hit the bell, leave a comment, and remember, always use a password. Stay safe out there.